Today I'm going to be showing you how to make the modern diamond quilt block. Aren't they so cute? My name is Fallon and I love to quilt, and today we're going to be making a modern diamond quilt block, and the pattern is available on my website. Let's jump right in and get it made. When I prep my fabric for the modern diamonds pattern, I personally really like to starch my fabric so that it is very stiff. So I use a very heavy starch. This product was recommended to me by Chris from Sew the Distance, and I think it works really, really well for this. It almost gives the fabric like a paper feel to it, and there is no stretching or warping when sewing along those bias edges. So, and I mean, this fabric is papery after. I know a lot of you don't like to use starch at all, and you don't like that feel of the fabric. This is going to wash out, and I'm telling you, it saves a lot of frustration when working this pattern together. If you don't want to use this product, it is a little pricey. You can always use any other heavy starch that you may have or like to use. If you don't want to use starch at all, that is perfectly fine. Just know that you're going to have to be very, very, very careful and mindful when you're sewing this together. So I'm going to first start showing you how to cut for the diamond portion of this pattern. So I'm going to be using the templates my husband made. They are available on our shop, but just know if you do want to purchase this pattern, there are paper templates available as well. So here's how the paper template looks in the PDF file you'll receive if you purchase the pattern. And notice there is a 1-inch box here. So when you print this out, you'll want to make sure you print at 100%. And when you print it, you can measure this box to make sure everything is the correct size. If this box is a 1-inch box for you, then it is the correct size. So you would cut around the dotted line of the template and use that to cut out your pieces. All right, so I'm going to show you 2 different ways to cut out your fabric using the templates for the diamonds. This will be really helpful for the first method to not have a lot of waste of your fabric when you're cutting out the diamonds, and the second way will just show you how you can use it to fussy cut your fabric and maybe get little designs in the fabric that you're using to make sure they stand out in the block. All right, so I am going to cut 3-inch strips from this fabric. So what I'm going to do, since it's so stiff, I mean, you can tell how, how stiff this fabric is. So since it is a fat quarter and just fits across my mat easily, I'm probably just gonna leave it flat like this. Typically, if I'm using some yardage, I would fold it in half and then cut my strips. But I'm just going to leave it out here, line it up kind of straight on my mat, and then I'm just going to square up one edge of it. So I'm just going to straighten this edge here. And then I have a second ruler here that I'm going to line up along that freshly cut edge at 3 inches, and then I'm going to cut a strip from it. All right, so I have a 3-inch strip of fabric here. If you're doing, like, say, a yard of fabric, you'll have a 3-inch by width of fabric strip, and then you would just cut the rest of your fabric into 3-inch strips so that you can get all of your diamonds cut out for the pattern. All right, so since I'm just using a fat quarter, I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of my 3-inch strips quickly, and then I'll show you how to cut the diamonds out. Now, if you have the pattern, you can see that I kind of gave a little diagram that shows how to lay out the diamonds to cut them. So you can always refer back to that as well. I just really wanted to show in a video as well. just because I'm very visual, so I often suspect other people are very visual too and just really like to see how everything's done. All right, so I got all of my strips cut. Now I'm going to jump into cutting out the diamonds. So I'm going to lay my template up on the strip, and you can see that there is space around the strip. So it's not cut perfectly to size. So there is about a 1/4 inch overhang that you are going to have. I really like having the template you can see through. Mine's a little dirty because there was overspray from my starch. I had them close by, but there is a 1/4 inch seam allowance around here. So you can kind of see if you're getting some of the design you want in here. Now, if you don't want to waste too much fabric, you may not want to go over so much, but it can kind of give you an idea if you're close of how you may want the block to look when it is mostly done. So I like the way it looks there. And so I'm going to cut along this side, and this template is really nice because you can just kind of turn it and do all of your trimming. You don't have to pick it up and move it or have a rotating mat. It'll just grip the fabric and you can turn it and trim all around the block. So it makes it really easy to get a nice, precise piece of fabric. So I'm going to push that to the side, and I'm going to keep trimming the rest of my fabric. But I mean, you can see how stiff this fabric is. It's going to make it a breeze to sew this block together. I promise you, it is so worth it for cuts like this. So yeah. All right, I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm going to get the rest of this cut up so that we can move on to some more of the cuts we need and then get to the fun part, which is sewing this together. All right, so I got that fabric cut up, but I'm also going to have some diamonds in some other fabrics as well that I'm going to get it cut up. And one of the fabrics I really want to fussy cut as much as I can, and that is this cute giraffe fabric. I really think it's going to look so amazing having these giraffes highlighted in this quilt. So it's honestly really easy to cut them out, but I still want to show you how I'm going to do that just so you can see the process. All right, so I'm going to kind of start over in this corner of the fabric and work through here as much as I can. And I'm going to start with this giraffe that is sitting because I think that one is going to be very, very easy to cut out. It'll fit in really nicely. And again, since I have that line around here, it may not look easy to see on camera, but the way this ruler is laser cut, that line through there kind of glows when the light hits it. So it makes it really easy to actually see it. Now, one thing you could do is, so I have the giraffe lined up inside of that seam allowance line, but one thing I like to do, and I try not to forget to do this, but sometimes I do, is the diamond is actually going to be facing upright in the pattern. So I like to turn and make sure I like the way the giraffe looks sitting upright because, you know, I think it's cute sitting that way, but that's not how the diamond is actually going to be oriented in the pattern. So it may not look as cute sitting upright, if that makes sense. So just think about that, and maybe it won't matter to you how it's setting, especially depending on the design that you are cutting out. Maybe a flower wouldn't make as much of a difference, but an animal might, right? You don't want it to be looking like it's falling over. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So I think this guy looks fine because he's going to be sitting either way and not really turned too much anyway. And it honestly would probably be hard to fit them in completely upright in here. It kind of fits better this way, so we're gonna make it work. So there we go. Let me get him back there. Looks good. And so I'm just going to cut one side out and go off to the edge so I can pull the fabric away, and that way I can turn and cut around the other sides and make it easier for me. So these guys I really couldn't use for this idea because so much of them were cut off. Oh my goodness, look how cute that little giraffe is sitting there. I cannot wait to get this quilt together. That is just absolutely darling little design there. So I'm going to set this to the side, and then we'll take a look and see what else we can get in here. So this one's going to be a little bit harder because I will cut some of it off, and because of how far over I had the ruler over here, it's hard to get in and get him in really good. But I can see I will definitely cut his legs off there. And then I want to be mindful, if I want to use this guy here, I may need to bring this down and get his head right at the top of that angle to make sure I have enough room to get this sitting guy. So a lot of things to think about when you're fussy cutting fabric is you might not be able to get every single design because part of your template that you're cutting from may cut into some of the other ones. Let me get this guy. Tried to stay, not cut over too much into him to see if I can get him in. There we go. I think he actually looks pretty cute. I mean, we did get some of his hoof cut off there, and some more of it's going to get cut off in the seam allowance, but still really cute. You'll be able to still tell what animal it is, which I think is the most important part. So I'm going to get more of these cut out, and then I'm going to show you how to cut the side triangles. All right, so this is my background fabric, and I have a lot of it here. It's folded up a few times, so I'm going to show you how to cut it pretty efficiently. So I'm going to square up one edge of it. And I cut through a lot of layers. There are a lot of layers here, 8 layers of fabric. The Slidelock holds it really well and in place for me because it has those bumpers on the bottom that when I press down, it grips the fabric and keeps it from moving around. So I feel pretty confident cutting through all these layers with the Slidelock, but you may not want to depending on what ruler you're using if it slips a lot. So keep that in mind. All right, so to make it simple, we're going to cut 3-inch strips again. So I'm going to line my ruler up here on that line I made. And this is why it can be hard depending on the ruler you have, because how thick this fabric is, you can see the ruler moves around a lot. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to cut a lot of layers at once. So I lined up against the 3-inch. And I'm pressing down and going to cut through all that fabric again. And do notice that I did starch all of my fabric, or used that product on all of it. So all of it is nice and stiff. So I'm going to put those strips to the side, and then I'm going to cut the rest of my fabric here. All right, so I have a bunch of 3-inch strips here, and now we're going to start using the template. So when I can, I really like to cut multiple pieces at one time. My fabric is usually layered when I cut, so I'll usually be cutting, you know, like 2 to 4 squares out at one time. Here with the template, I feel like it's really important to cut them one at a time once you get to this stage. The fabric can shift a lot when you're turning and cutting. So to get really accurate cuts, it's honestly much better to take your time and cut one at a time. Now, I'm not saying you have to. I'm just recommending that it works a little better if you cut them one at a time, in my opinion. All right, so line your template up along one side, and this one should fit in place a little bit better. And honestly, after I have it set up, I remember that it works a little bit better if you have the fabric facing upright, because you're gonna cut that first angle, this side angle first. So let me line it back up, make sure everything's lined up good. And then I'm gonna cut across here. Now you see I went straight off the edge there. I feel like that works better for me. And then now I can twist and cut all of the sides. If you need to trim up here, trim up there. I'm gonna trim across the bottom, and then I'm gonna cut off that final little notched edge. And there I have one of my side triangles. So there that is. Now I am using solid fabric here, so there's really no right or wrong side to it in my mind. I'm sure somebody out there knows how to tell the right from the wrong side. I do not. So for me, I've never had an issue just letting it be whatever side I feel like sewing on. For this one, that's not really an issue. I'm going to show you how to cut one more, and then I want to show you why it is really important to cut how my pattern indicates with some of your fabric right side up and some of your fabric wrong side up. All right, so here you will just put your template back in as close as you can get to that edge if you're wanting to make sure you save some fabric. Make sure it's lined up. All right, so I have it lined up in there, and then I'm just going to trim. That side's pretty close. Trim, and trim. All right, and then we got another side triangle there. So I'm gonna set that to the side. And now I have some scrap fabric here. So I'm just gonna show you really quick. I'm not gonna cut this really perfect. And this fabric is definitely not starched. So cut here. And I'm gonna cut this all in the same direction. So with the fabric facing right side up. Cut off there. It's not lined up perfectly. I know that. This is just to show what happens if you don't turn the fabric to right side and wrong side. All right, so if we lay out our diamond to get it ready to sew, and we place our side triangles here, two of them are perfect, right? But you can't put one of these side triangles here. You only have ones that will fit on the top right and the bottom left. So that is why it is really important to remember, if you're using a printed fabric, to cut from the other side with the wrong side up, which is indicated in the pattern. I tell you how many to cut wrong side up and right side up. So make sure to follow that instruction. So let me cut both of these. Now, if you're just using solid fabrics, you'll be fine. But if you're using like a tone-on-tone or a print for the background, just keep that in mind. Okay, so then we have the two that we cut with the right side of the fabric up. And now this had the wrong side up, and it'll fit on the other side. So that is why I put that notation in there. If you are using a solid fabric, then just cut and cut and cut and cut. You'll be fine. All right, so now that we have all of our fabric cut, we can head over to the fun part at the sewing machine and sew these blocks together. I have two different block layouts for this quilt, and both of them are going to have a dark background. I do think this quilt looks amazing if you do a checkerboard kind of light and dark background, but I really wanted the diamonds to be highlighted in this quilt, so they're all going to be dark. So I'm going to show you how to bring this block together. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the block that I have here with the giraffe print, because I think it'll be easier to see how to bring this block together if you are using a directional fabric, and if you're not, it still comes together the same way. So let's take a look at the giraffe fabric. So I had the giraffe fabric situated at the top of the larger diamond that we're forming, and then I have the two other fabrics forming a diamond. So I have the two that are gray side by side and the giraffe in a coordinating like cream fabric below it. So starting with the top block in the diamond and then the diamond gray, we're going to take the giraffe, make sure it's still facing up, and then flip it right sides together on the gray fabric. And then because we have those notches at the points of the diamond, these fabrics fit together really nicely. So it's really easy to see that everything is lined up properly. So we're gonna bring it over to the needle and sew a 1/4 inch seam across here. We're gonna press toward the darker fabric. For me, it's this gray, and I'm just going to finger press here because I used that that product that really starched this fabric really heavy. So a finger press works really well here. If you didn't starch or didn't starch really heavy, you may want to press here. All right, so I'm keeping this segment nearby so I can line up next to it, but we're going to set it to the side and focus on the next two diamonds in this block. This time our gray fabric is on top, so we're going to put it right sides together with the cream fabric that is on the bottom. Make sure everything's lined up and sew a 1/4 inch seam. And then we're going to press toward the same fabric as before, the darker fabric. For me, it is the gray fabric. All right, and then you'll see that those are going to come together really nicely. So I'm going to put them right sides together, and everything should line up if we sew proper 1/4 inch seams very, very nicely so that we get a point here. Now, if you're worried about it not lining up perfectly on its own, you can measure in a 1/4 inch here from the edge, put a little mark, and then put a needle through there. That will show you and keep everything straight so you get a perfect point. I think I did pretty good sewing here, and there's not going to be much stretching at all for me since I have such a heavy starch on here. So I'm going to sew across. I think it should be good. All right, so we got a really good point here. I'm happy with that one. And my giraffe looks really cute here. This fabric is just so adorable. So now all we have to do is put these side triangles around the diamond, and we're just gonna sew them on one at a time, pressing after each diamond. So I'm just gonna line it up here and then sew a 1/4 inch seam. Press. I'm going to press toward the darker fabric, which is my side triangle. I'd probably press that direction either way. It's just going to be a little less bulk than pressing in toward where all these other seams are over here. Add on the next triangle, line everything up, and then just sew a 1/4 inch seam across there. This block is really easy to put together. I feel like cutting all the fabric probably takes the longest, and then sewing it is just so much fun seeing it come together. I mean, that's with any project though. I feel like the sewing is always the fun part. And then we put on the next triangle and sew across. All right, and so there we go. Oh my goodness, it is so cute. So I'm going to press this with my iron, add some heat to it. For this product that I use, that Terreal Magic, I am going to mist it with some water, not heavy, just a light mist, and then press it. That'll help it really lay nice and flat. All right, so here are the two blocks I'm making for this quilt, and I think they are going to look really cute together once I get them all finished. I'm just going to lay them out on my design wall and make sure that they are in a layout that I really like. And then I'll sew all the rows together and bring that quilt top together. And all you have to do is base the quilt as desired, quilt as desired, and put a binding on the quilt. The quilt that I am making here for the modern diamond quilt pattern is a baby size quilt. There are only 24 blocks in this quilt, so it comes together pretty quickly. But the pattern on my website has all the information to make 5 different quilt sizes. There will be a baby size, a throw size, twin, queen, and king. But of course you could make any size quilt you want. Just figure out how many blocks you want in your quilt. This block finishes at 5 inches by 10 inches. So you can make any size that you would like, add borders, just make this quilt your own. Scraps would look amazing in this quilt, and it definitely is on my list to make a scrappy quilt using this diamond pattern. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!